1977, I was treating AML with 7 and 3.
Okay.
In 2018, I'm still treating AML with 7 and 3. What is your solution moving forward for 2028 to do things differently, Michael?
It's to better understand the molecular heterogeneity of acute myeloid leukemia, and to better understand the immunosuppressives that are released or expressed by the leukemic blasts in order to counter those things with much more specific therapy.
So you think there is hope which is more than incremental advancement?
Yes,
in this
I
approach?
think that we're likely to find in combinations of targeted therapies and immune therapy the ability to eliminate the leukemic stem cell and cure leukemia. And I think there are some examples of that, depending on the molecular subtype. So I think further molecular characterization, we're not there yet. The disease is really vastly heterogeneous. And better understanding, as I say, the molecules that are expressed and released that suppress the immune system, those two in combination, would likely eliminate the need for 7 and 3. And I was around when you were giving 7 and 3.
So if I ask you that, how is this rhetoric any different than what I've been hearing for 40 years? The immune part?
Mm-hmm. I think it's really the explosion of the tools that have become available for a real in-depth understanding. I hope I'm not wrong 10 years from now, but I really believe that with deep sequencing, we're really likely, and the speed at which it can be done and the price for which it can be done and the numbers of patients that are banked that therefore can contribute. And we really need hundreds of thousands of cases, not thousands. We really can start to dissect in meaningful numbers the molecular heterogeneity of these diseases. Say all of the M4 AMLs, there's undoubtedly an abundance of combinations of molecular hits that lead to that phenotype that the pathologist calls M4 AML, but indeed is vastly different amongst all the M4s. And that really understanding that and looking at the targeted therapeutics that are being developed, we'll find things that interrupt pathways that are critical for the survival of these cells. And as my good friend Carlo Croce likes to say, they'll drop dead.
Better than them than the patients.
Absolutely. But I really think that compared to when I was your medical student and we were at Roswell Park doing a rotation, I was at Roswell Park doing a rotation in transplant there. They're really now starting to understand and have the tools to understand the molecular heterogeneity, and that's the key.
Okay. So there have been 3.5 million papers published in cancer. In 2017 alone, Michael, there were 137,000 papers published. But there's a staggering disconnect between the biologic insights those papers are reporting and their translation into improved therapies for our patients. Mm-hmm. What are we doing wrong?
I think we've developed a culture of us versus them when we talk about academia and industry. And in fact, we need each other. We need discovery from academia, and we need a partnership with industry for the financial power to bring things through fruition. I can tell you at my institution here, my former institution, former institutions that I've been at, so many scientists make discoveries and don't think to patent those discoveries. And when they're not patented, coming up with the financial wherewithal to bring them forward becomes much less interesting to the pharmaceutical world. In a capitalist society, patents, proprietary rights to develop something and frankly profit from it become a huge driver to saving lives. And when we can't do that, when we don't do that, when we don't emphasize enough commercialization on campus at our universities, our patients are suffering from it. And then, for industry likewise to come to universities, as they are more and more these days, interestingly, to realize that, maybe you don't need a big R&D costing billions of dollars. Maybe the discoveries are right in front of you, and developing real partnerships, say, providing financial resources for first right of refusal to look at your compounds, to look at your discoveries, and to have a robust patenting process would be a huge transformation. So in a way, from when I started, it was non-overlapping Venn diagrams. There was you were in academia or you went to the other side to industry. And in fact, it's a continuum. That's how we get the right things to patients. And I think we'll speed it up. As we have at City of Hope is a culture of, I would say, entrepreneurship. You know, we've had literally hundreds of millions of dollars in royalties coming into City of Hope for the last 10 to 15 years based on discoveries that were patented and brought to companies like Genentech for mass production, saving hundreds of thousands of lives. So it's a culture that's not well ingrained in most universities, but needs to be.
The fact that children respond to the same treatment better than adults appears to suggest that the biology is different,
Yes.
but then also the host is different.
Absolutely.
So what I'm asking you is, since most cancer incidence increases with age, even having a good therapy, effective therapy may not matter because the host is just too decrepit. What is your solution?
Well, in that instance, and I agree with you, for example, AML in the elderly, you need less toxic, effective therapies because there's liver is older, kidneys are older, brain is older, and so the same intensive therapies that we are curing younger people with cannot be as effective because, as we say here, no sense in curing the body if you've in the process destroy the soul, right? So there's a couple ways around that. One is, and I think we're working on those here and elsewhere, you know, one is to develop effective but less toxic therapies. And we're seeing that now in transplant where we're doing literally all of our myeloma transplants are outpatient here completely. And a number of our transplants of other hematological diseases, they're outpatients, they're milder forms. And they're still in some instances curative. So working that balance with decreasing the toxicity but increasing the efficacy, again, through immune therapies in combination with targeted therapies and really trying to eliminate the cytotoxics, which, you know, are of course poisonous to the cancer cell, but poisonous to the normal cells as well. I think that's going to be the way to go.
You don't think this immune therapy is too hyped up?
No, I think that if you think about it, Sidney Farber, when he first delivered the folate antagonist, was 60 or 70 years ago, and think of where we've gone with chemotherapy since then. We're just seeing the first response with immune therapy, and we really have to think over the next 20, 30, 40, 50 years, what are we going to see? We've just now figured out how to wake up the immune system to recognize leukemia, melanoma, etc. We're just where Sidney Farber was. It's like, oh, we can kill these cells. But now we're going to see that more and more molecules are going to be discovered that put the immune system to sleep. More and more antagonists are going to be developed that wake up the immune system. Neoantigen sequencing is going to realize more and more targets for, say, T cells or natural killer cells. Point is, we're going to see combinations of these technologies and these therapeutics move into the clinic, less toxic and hopefully more beneficial.
I like that.
That's my belief.
Fourth question is that you have great knowledge and experience in the field. If I was to give you limitless resources to design the best outcome for cancer patients, what would it be? What would be your new paradigm for cancer?
Yeah, that's a great question. What I would like to do, you know, I co-founded an organization called Orion, where we're really trying to sequence all the cases in cancer. We have consented about 250,000 patients in 18 cancer centers. And we're collecting all the clinical data on those patients. This is all done for free at the cancer centers that join. In fact, we pay people for the sequencing, and then we share the information with pharma, and we share it amongst ourselves. So what I would like to see is more of a open access, if you will, for data. That's the sequencing data, the clinical data, and working with our pharmaceutical colleagues to identify the targets, understand, is this good prognosis, bad prognosis. So if I had to redesign the system, I'd have a single medical record. I'd sequence every case just as I do a CBC, whole exome sequencing, RNA sequencing. I'd upload that data. I would upload the clinical data. And I would partner with pharma in a commercialization effort, because somehow this all has to be paid for, where pharma is paying for the rights to access it, but of course with the possibility of huge rewards to come. And the scientists and physicians are getting that payment to do more sequencing and to do their research. This is Orion in a nutshell. And there are other examples of this where the patients are not consented, but where we're collecting large amounts of data. Project Genie from AACR is another great example of this. So if you notice, my theme is more of a brotherhood with pharmaceutical firms and academia. You know, there's so much we can do together. We have a similar goal of curing patients, but this group really wants to discover, this group really wants to commercialize, and so we need each other. So if I had unlimited amounts of money, I would really fuel Orion for the whole country, fuel a single medical record, so that we could all have the clinical data, have the molecular data, and really work collegially and collaboratively with our pharmaceutical colleagues to discover, produce, and commercialize.
Fantastic, I like. And last question is, offering patients with advanced stage, non-curable cancers, palliative but very toxic treatments, is a service or a disservice in the current therapeutic landscape?
Yes, if it's not in a clinical trial, I think it's a disservice. There was a time, and you may remember this, I do, when acute promyelocytic leukemia was considered unethical to treat because of the disseminated intravascular coagulation associated with the therapy. Today, you and I know 95% of people are cured with that disease. So had we stopped then because it was unethical to treat them, would have been a mistake. Continued to treat them on protocols where we're studying, collecting the data, we're learning, we're adjusting, we're moving on. I think APL is a perfect example where, you know, once we got a hint of something, boom, 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 it moved very quickly. But there was a time, and I think it was a New England Journal article, where there was a call to stop treating these patients because of the DIC. So to treat them for treatment's sake, no, wrong, unethical, but to treat them with full consent, with an investigational protocol, understanding the very, very low likelihood that something's going to work, but that we might answer a question and advance the field, I think is still appropriate for the willing patient.
And finally, Michael, you have been a leader for one of the largest cancer enterprises in the country. You have successfully gotten huge sums of funding from philanthropy, private sources, as well as government funding, and you have mentored some fantastic young scientists. So you have a stellar career, a spectacular view of the whole cancer paradigm. Would you like to make some closing statements about what your journey has been and how you see the future?
Well, that's very, very kind of you, very gracious comments, Azra. You know, I had the benefit of, after my training at Dana-Farber, where I was first exposed to cancer, first exposed laboratory Jerry Ritz to science, of landing at Roswell Park, where I first met you during medical school on that rotation, and coming under the mentorship of Clara Bloomfield, who you know. And Clara is what I would call a selfless leader who did everything she could in her power to see to it that I had the protected time that I need, that I learned how to think, was super critical of me, and allowed me to watch her as a successful leader, and then allowed me the space to move into leadership when we both moved to Ohio State University and had the opportunities to build. So if I had to think of one instance and one person, it would be having been well trained at the Farber, moving to Roswell Park, meeting Clara, and moving under her mentorship, which to this day she remains my mentor. So most grateful for that professionally. I've always had a very, very supportive spouse and great kids who've understood that I'm kind of addicted to this, and they've respected that and you know, applauded me along the way. So very grateful. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you.
Yeah.
That was brilliant. Thank you very much for your time and